Well, we had our fun, but it's all downhill from here. We are going to see two of my least favorite bosses in hard mode in this episode. This boss highlights a problem. I think we have footage of it. This is one of the more egregious examples of the AI stepping things up for the player. There was a time when it used its Blackwater Blast, which is a move with a very clear zoning element. It deals damage in a very specific area.
Yeah.
There are the pipes on the walls, and it strikes in a line extending from that pipe. Complicated somewhat as the battle unfolds, as it uses it from multiple pipes simultaneously. But as we've established, you don't have great control over the position of your party members, generally speaking. I feel like I might have overlooked something. I dodged out of the way at the last second while controlling Aerith, and I was just relying on the AI to have Cloud and Tifa get out of the way too.
Yeah.
And it seems like they were trying to stay close to my position during that almost sort of like scripted moment, because it jumps high outside the arena and starts charging that attack.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was the end of that run.
Man, the AI really doesn't do you any favors in this game.
Yeah, that one I feel partially responsible for, but because it's such a specific scenario, I feel like because the consequences were so dire, at some point, I think they could have included a tip that said like, hey, your party members will sometimes try to stay on your location for certain attacks, you know? There's another moment in this battle that was a little frustrating. It shows the weaknesses of Reprieve. Aerith got battered by several attacks before I had an opportunity to respond meaningfully.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because it feels like a solved problem. In Kingdom Hearts, there are two life preservation techniques. The idea is one preserves your health through single strong attacks, and the other will keep you alive during a game, like a designer-defined combo string, right? This game, it lacks that combo string safety mechanism.
Yeah.
I want to use this time to elaborate on a point that's not going away. It's basically here for the rest of hard mode. Bosses increasingly have the ability to do sudden burst damage. We started seeing it with Hell House. It felt a little more fair there because you're fighting a house, and a lot of its high damage attacks, it involves hitting you with a house.
Yeah.
So the Abzu is done for now. You fight it again later, and spoiler, I suppose, it is a spoiler of sorts. I consider the second fight with the Abzu to be one of the most frustrating, most difficult in the game. I think that it was harder for me than any of the secret hard mode content.
Yeah.
And the final boss.
Really?
Oh yeah. You'll see why when we get there. Right now, it's fine. Now we come to a peculiar little aside. It is another minigame, this time featuring Aerith and Tifa. I like it. I think it's a cute one. There isn't a whole lot of advice that I can give. It's interesting that it's sort of self-correcting. Over time, accessibility options have become more broadly available in games, especially larger titles like this one. I think that this minigame has a nice, non-intrusive way of being more accessible to people that might not have the reflexes or the physical ability to rapidly press a button. It might be painful for someone to try to mash a button as quickly as this minigame might initially seem to require. As you fail to increase the pressure, later rounds, it builds more easily. I imagine that if someone was struggling to complete this, after a certain point, the entire back half of the wheel would be full, and it would essentially become impossible to fail. So I like that. It feels like a nice, smooth, inline way of addressing a serious problem. I think I prefer it to them simply letting you skip it from a menu, you know?
Yeah.
Just because it still gives you the impression that you completed it. Now we have something that I am not embarrassed about at all. In my initial playthrough on normal, I think I only got a game over one time, and it was against the Sahagin in the sewers. Their jump damage it's quite high.
Yeah.
If several of them decide to jump on a target in rapid succession, you can go from healthy to unconscious very quickly. I favor, for my internal morale, I am quick to restart a situation if things aren't going my way.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I say that I only received one game over over the course of normal mode, I mean, that's also true of hard mode. There were many times where I likely would have failed, but I sidestepped that sense of failure by sort of seizing the initiative and saying, no, we're going back in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't like this either. It's fine. We'll just redo.
Yeah. That sort of ties into... I might have been doing myself a kindness by imposing that no KOs rule.
Yeah.
I want to complete each scenario without any character being KO'd, at least one.
Yeah.
Whenever a character falls, you have to fix it in battle. You're losing out on 3 different time scales, right?
Mm-hmm.
3 different resource tracks. You're spending ATB, you're spending MP, and you've wasted a materia slot on life.
Yeah.
So that's like sort of short-term, mid-term, and long-term costs that you're paying. In a certain sense, maybe just saying, no, forget it. I'm just going to restart if anybody gets KO'd. Over the duration of the entire game, it might have been to my benefit to do.
Yeah.
Time to revisit Cloud's personal hard mode. He struggles with intimacy, but it's clear that he desires it. He never knows what to do whenever he actually has it.
Yeah.
So this is really the true challenge of this chapter. It's a 4-legged race. You spend the entire chapter stuck together like this.
Look at his posture. It's awful. He's like, ah.
A plank of wood. Yeah. Hey, I just noticed something. Wait, play that back. Hold on. I think I just noticed a weird technical trick. Guys, did you really? Hold on. Holy crap.
They shortened the girls for this scene, and then the models get back to tall when you are getting ready to walk back into the arena.
I don't know if this is worth including. It's interesting to talk about. You don't think I should like this boss?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it just as an itemized list,
yeah,
it doesn't sound like a good time.
Yeah. Earlier on, when you were fighting the Abzu, you had mentioned that it was starting to deal large amounts of damage very quickly, and it was getting really hard to manage.
Yeah, it was. The bosses have started dealing excessive burst damage.
It doesn't sound like a problem that's going away, so can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. This boss actually features that same element to its design, where it can KO a healthy character very quickly. I believe we have footage of this boss's extreme ability to deal abrupt damage. An AI-controlled Tifa went from full HP to 0 HP, I believe over the course of 4 seconds.
Yeah. That's just too quickly to expect anyone to switch over and react to. Like, could you even cast anything that quickly?
I don't think so. More importantly, during that exact situation, even if I had had the wherewithal to switch to Tifa, I don't think she would have been able to... She was recoiling from an attack. I don't think I would have been able to dodge out of the way of the second explosive part of the slash attack. So speaking of that itemized list, what this boss can do, its list of functions, it's quite broad. Really features one of everything that I hate. It has an AoE stun that has an excessive radius, because I can hit multiple targets. It has a problem with the arena where everything is a little too blue. The debris can be quite disruptive, and that at-a-glance pathfinding you have to be able to do, it's not eased by how blue everything in this arena is. Also, it tends to impact the player more than the boss.
Yeah.
It has 2 principal ranged attacks. It has the ability to telekinetically throw debris. If you are far enough away, the stuff on the ground might intercept the stuff it throws. Additionally, it has a long-ranged slash attack. That just ignores the blocking terrain completely. It also has a fairly uncommon, it's something that I absolutely loathe. It has a long-ranged grab attack. Yeah, you might be able to see it. I think that there's at least one point where it turns into a surprise long-range grab attack. I switch to Cloud only to discover that he's being grappled telekinetically by a spectral red hand. And on top of all of that, this boss also features a fairly complicated gimmick. The boss alternates between being corporeal and ethereal.
Yeah.
When it's corporeal, it can only meaningfully be damaged by physical attacks, while ethereal, it can only be impacted by magical attacks. Essentially what that means for me in this battle, Cloud and Tifa are covering the physical portion, and then Aerith is covering the magical portion. The reason for that doubling up on the physical, a lot of it has to do with that AoE scream. There are several points in this battle where Cloud or Tifa will be stunned and I will switch to the other just so I can keep the pressure up, right?
Yeah.
The debris actually, I think, makes Aerith's job in this battle much harder because optimally you want to be casting on her ward so that way you benefit from the double cast effect.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have all of these different elements align, you know?
Yeah.
One thing that I would like to take some time to do right now, because we're commentating over the game, and because of the recording setup we have, we can't listen to the game at volume while recording. I want to take a minute to listen to the boss theme from the latter half of this battle, because I think it's my favorite track in the game, and I want you to be able to hear it.
Take care of him. You can do it.
Taking over. Get ready. This'll sting.
It really picks up whenever the sort of haunting choir comes in.
Yeah.
If I had a criticism of it, it's a very triumphant song in what is otherwise sort of a spooky battle. The thing that stands out to me about this song, I don't know if it is a reimagining of a song from the original game. I think that that's important to acknowledge because I'm fairly familiar with Final Fantasy VII's soundtrack, if only because of Voices of the Lifestream, which was it's a fantastic album of fan-produced remixes.
Yeah.
So I feel like if this had been in the original game in some way, I probably would have heard a really rad remix of it at some point. It makes me happy thinking that there's room for expression in the development of this title.
Yeah.
Because even if it was in the original in some capacity, it didn't stand out, and now it does.
So if this boss has all of those things that you dislike so much, if this boss has one of everything you hate, then why don't you hate this boss?
I think that it has to do with the delay in the order of its attacks. I mentioned before that there's a point where I switched to Cloud, and he was telekinetically grappled.
Yeah.
That is the only time I noticed that. If there was ever a point where if I switched to Cloud and found him telekinetically grappled, and then switched to Tifa and found her in the same state, maximum fury, immediate rage, you know?
Yeah.
But that never happens. Compared to, say, Airbuster, where the stuns happen pretty consistently throughout the fight, its stunning scream, it's a bit easier to see coming and move out of the way of. I think that it just balances all of these, what on paper I ought to hate, it balances them all in a way that makes them acceptable. Yeah, and also it has a nice theme. I mentioned before that the overly blue arena made it hard to navigate.
Yeah.
But it gives a visual presence to this battle that you don't really see anywhere else in the game. Eligor, I consider it to be the greatest failure of this playthrough.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It feels like a boss with a trick, a boss with a gimmick that I didn't figure out. I didn't deduce the designer's intent in this battle. I did it a couple of times, and I still... There was never a moment where everything sort of clicked into place, and I thought, oh, that's the trick. That's what I'm supposed to do.
Right, so either it's a really clunky boss or you didn't figure it out.
Yeah, and I can't determine which. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet, I did not consult any FAQs or anything. I watched Dan Floyd play this game on Playframe as I was playing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some observations that he made that I benefited from, but generally anything that I deduced in this title, I did it myself.
Yeah.
I still actually haven't done, because I've beaten it on hard mode, I don't have any desire to dig any deeper into the mechanics and figure out stuff that I overlooked or didn't figure out. So here's an example. I played the entire game on normal and hard without ever figuring out that you can use Tifa's dive kick from midair, and it cancels the downtime after some techniques that launch her into the air, and it lets the move come out more quickly because she doesn't have to jump into the air first.
Yeah.
But I played through the entire game without ever figuring that out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that there are still a ton of things like that, but the one that stands out, the one that I'm most bitter about is Eligor. I have not bothered to check online, or what are you supposed to do? What did they mean for you to do here? You know?
Would it be worse if you had figured it out?
No, I mean, if I had figured it out, I would have felt like a smart boy. But it's just... So let me explain a few things about the history of Final Fantasy. This boss features 2 classic tropes. It is an undead boss, which historically would have given it a vulnerability to cure or life magic. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is the case here. The other thing it does is, at least in hard mode, about a third of the way through its HP meter, it casts Reflect on the entire party and itself. In the older titles, that would have prompted a lot of thought on the player's part. Mm-hmm. You would have had to think like, oh, what am I to do here? Because in those titles, you could often target anyone on the field with any spell. Mm-hmm. And the designers made space for that. They allowed you to do that so you could play with it, you know?
Yeah.
So here's an easy example. In some Final Fantasy titles, Reflect, whenever it bounces a spell back, that spell receives a bonus to the damage it deals. It is therefore possible to cast Reflect on one of your party members and then blast them with magic to reflect it at the enemy team and deal increased damage. Yeah.
Weird. Interesting.
Yeah, but this game doesn't afford you the ability to target your own characters with aggressive magic in that way, usually. I think that probably Berserk is a spell that I love in theory because you can cast it on friends and foes. You can cast it on enemies and you give them an attack buff but reduce their defense. And it applies to your allies just the same way, but it means different things, you know?
Yeah.
Ideally, you'd stagger an enemy and then cast Berserk on an ally and the enemy. So you get effectively a free damage bonus, and they get a defense penalty that they can't make use of the attack buff.
Yeah.
But they just don't equip you with the HUD elements necessary to make it feel like you can interact with this boss's ability to broadly cast Reflect in a meaningful way. Instead, it's more like an ATB tax, where you have to dispel that Reflect before you target it with magic. And it's just all of these mismatched elements. For example, it's weak to ice, but it moves so quickly that ice almost never can hit it when it's moving around. So there's a point in this battle where I just have Tifa cast Thunder on it to get a little bit of damage in because it hits instantly. So over the course of the battle, if I had thought of that sooner, I probably could have done much more consistent damage with Thunder instead of ever trying for Ice unless it was staggered.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I feel like I cut the nut.
Right.
I didn't learn what I was supposed to, and I just sort of pushed my way through. There were a couple of things that I thought to try, and I thought, aha, this is what I'm to do. But it didn't have the fight-defining impact that I was looking for. I thought to poison it whenever it started moving around, because I figured it will at least wear it down over time, regardless of where it is on the field.
Yeah.
The other thing I tried, it makes sense, so I thought it was going to be the solution. During the third phase of the battle, it will not sit still. So I thought, I'll spike its wheel. And I used a stop on one of its wheels, and I thought, aha, this is it. This is what you're supposed to do. I was disappointed to learn when I tried again later that it builds up a resistance to being stopped. Cloud, after casting Stop, didn't even have time to move to Eligor before it could move again. With the benefit of hindsight, I think that maybe the reason why the boss is divided into thirds, 2 wheels and then the rider itself,
Yeah.
that might be so you can cast Stop on each part individually. But I didn't check that. I don't care to check that because it's done. I cleared it. This will just have to be good enough. I'm going to take a quick awkward break from whatever else I happen to be saying, just so I can point out how ridiculous this little mid-battle cut is. Mm-hmm. They show that Aerith is in trouble and Tifa sweeps in to save her, but then it's just Cloud being a cool hero guy in the end anyway?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why they included that. I think they just wanted to have a cute face-to-face shot of Aerith and Tifa. Back on topic. As I mentioned, I think that this is the most disappointing performance I turn in the game. There are some fights that get a little rough later, but they're in-game bosses that you expect to be difficult, and as you'll see towards the end of the game, I develop a do-or-die attitude where I just want to finish hard mode.
Yeah.
So my play gets a little more aggressive, a little more sloppy, a little more desperate.
Don't overdo it.
I got this. I'm coming. It's your turn.
My turn.
I'll take care of you.
Need a breather.
Okay, let's go.
I'm waiting.
It's on you. Here goes. Why don't you lead the way?
Right through it. You're up. Keep it together.
All set. I'll take care of them. What the? Hey! You can do it.
Hang back.
There.
It's on you.
Let me.
Oh wait, look at that. I didn't even remember that. I did try casting Stop on the left wheel. I am a smart boy, and it did last a little longer. Alright, so I guess maybe I did figure it out. Still not my favorite.
So are you disappointed in the boss more or yourself?
I suppose I'm most disappointed in the designers, because I don't think that they effectively communicated a satisfying counter to this boss's behavior.
I see.
Maybe if the wheels were more obviously breakable, the wheels reflect, they cause physical attacks to rebound.
Right.
So it seems like it would be quite challenging to deplete the HP meter of one. Unless there was something that I was missing, like maybe if you cast ice on the wheel, it slows the boss, you know?
Yeah, but how would you do that with it running? I guess you would have to use stop and then ice, maybe?
Yeah, but the point is, I didn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so difficult that I needed to figure it out. In the end, my girl, Shiva, used Diamond Dust, and then my other girl, Tifa, gets in a sweet somersault. So basically, I beat the boss twice, and I should be commended for that.
Hold on, guys. We're coming. And you can go to hell!
That then is the end of the chapter. It contrasts starkly with what we just experienced. It's a bit of a shame. It's a string of tough bosses that can be a little mean-spirited, and it is a bit of a shock coming off of Wall Market.
Yeah.
I know that I said that it's all downhill from here earlier. I gave that impression. There are still bright spots left in this game. Things don't get truly dire until like the last... It'll be the last 2 episodes, and that's where things become noticeably more fraught. You can see it just in the way that I start like interacting with the menus. I'll open the party menu, and then I start flipping through my spells, just digging for a solution to a problem. So we're still a ways off from the dark times